out of that silo, that pet project, and throughout the rest of the company. You also need serious storage, which can require a fairly serious investment. We're not talking about the kind of storage that Google uses. Okay, Google captures about 20 petabytes of data daily. We're not talking about that kind of ability to store. These are things that can be done on the cloud. These are things that could be done on a rental basis. So you can capture this information in a very scalable and affordable way. You also need policies. In other words, what policies are available to make sure that you capture the right data and that it's analyzed by the right people? So in many ways, I'm not presenting today about social media per se. What I'm really presenting about is big data and analytics, a little bit about the Internet of Things, about business intelligence. That's why I started the presentation off with a cloud discussion and what that means in order to be able to take advantage of social media techniques. So it's not a question of looking outside to new markets necessarily or to market to new people. It's to look inside to find out what you can do with your company. So imagine if you could capture all communications, all of them, of your company, voicemail, email, various conversations, and then analyze them. So social media is an important part of this because it's all about the art of the implied. If you think about successful social media efforts and what they've been able to do, they've been basically able to capture the vision, or I should say capture the imagination of some form of audience. And yet they were able to do that not necessarily by asking the audience, hey audience, what do you want? They don't do that. Social media folks put something out there and then they wait for the response to see what people out there are doing. You can do the same thing with your company. You can basically, as they work, as they say things, as they store things, you can analyze things. And social media involves, yes, analyzing the black part of the page. It also means reading between the lines, looking at the white part of the page, as it were. For example, how many of you see this image here? How many of you see two faces? How many of you see some form of chalice or some sort of urn or something like that? Well, which is it? Okay? With social media and predictive analytics, you can basically capture the social wisdom of your company in such a way as that you can say, here's what we think is missing. Here's what we think we need to do next. So you look at implied messages and you read between the lines. Okay, now you have to be careful. Back in the day, I think a lot of people worry that social media is someplace where people exaggerate or don't tell the truth. That's why I put that image up there of the bird, of the Twitter bird with the long nose, the idea. Going back, it's a reference to Pinocchio. But people worry about the idea that, well, maybe there's just, not truthful out there. But I don't think that's the case. You can find wisdom in your company from studying various things. So here are some key social media principles from 2014 and beyond. Early on, I think social media was very, very ego-driven. It was some important person or some smart person who got up there and put together a blog. Midstream, a few years ago, starting maybe even a couple of years ago, people only looked externally, and the killer app was microblogs like Twitter. The current and the future is where you look internally into your company and you engage in conversations and analyze them. So the main thing that you have to think about when it comes to the future is the understanding the Internet of Things, that people and things from the kitchen refrigerator to your phone or what have you can all be GPS and IP enabled, and you can gather tremendous amounts of information. Privacy becomes an issue, and also massive data collection and massive data interpretation becomes a major issue. So we've all heard when it comes to the cloud in terms of volume and velocity and variety of data, okay? Those are the three key terms there. Let's talk about the next level. When it comes to mobile and cloud and integrated technologies, it's very important to think about ways in which you can control the volume, control the variety, and control the velocity of that information, but also put it all together so that you have proper analytics. So an emerging understanding of IT, is it beyond the internet? Is a new style of IT emerging is one of my questions. Think of it this way. Every 60 seconds, Every 60 seconds, every minute that goes by, you have a huge number of tweets, okay? Okay, 695,000 status updates in Facebook. I think we're all LinkedIn users. In what way can we capture that kind of information and check it out? And I think we're already here. Gamification. How many of you are interested or have been able to employ gamification inside of your company? Gamification is simply where the idea of points and levels and people liking and unliking leaderboards create incentives for people to contribute to the company. Yeah, you can say, well, we already know this about things such as Pinterest or LinkedIn or what have you, but you can do this internally to your company. Folksonomy. Now, taxonomy is the idea of the librarian or the expert basically creating a hierarchy of knowledge. A folksonomy is where the people do it, and through their activities, you can deduce a pattern. In what way can you do this in your own company? So best practices, think of it this way, that you have a repository of knowledge where the good stuff, the good material, rises naturally. And is categorized naturally. Cross-cultural communication. And by cross-cultural communication, I'm not talking about crossing across one country to the next or anything like that. I'm talking about the cultures in your business. The geeks in IT talking to the executives, talking to middle management. How can you capture company knowledge? And one way of doing that is shown in this next video, talking about BYOD, bring your own device. And here's what we have to say at CompTIA about BYOD. Now at CompTIA, we have certifications, for example, in social media security and everything, and other concepts. We bring in knowledge of the entire infrastructure, basically from understanding bring your own device, the actual physical device itself, to actually how to manage and secure it. But let's talk about potential when it comes to social media and security, because I think from the CIO perspective, it's a major issue. You have infrastructure issues with third-party platforms and a lot of internal platforms, and there are a lot of risks. And every CIO I know, and I know a lot of them, they're very risk averse, and for good reason. They're the one that gets the 3 a.m. phone call or basically the termination letter if things don't do well. The major issues have to do with identity theft. I can tell you a bit about that personally. Spear phishing and spam. Stalking and bullying and espionage. I think stalking and bullying from a CIO's perspective can also be very, very important to understand. Because when social media goes bad, it's not a question of getting new hardware. No firewall can help really. You can say, well, this is a quote, we build an 8-foot firewall and they get a 12-foot ladder. That was the CIO from Target who got attacked last year. Target got attacked last year. And the point behind understanding what it means to make a smart company isn't so much getting new equipment. It's basically not even getting new software. It's focusing on what I call the wetware, your brain, and training individuals how to compute securely. And that's a very, very important concept. So it's a question of wetware, educating IT workers, but also management and end users in security awareness. That's something that's very vital, and that's something at CompTIA we're advancing and coming up with a product even as we speak about security awareness. Well, we can't afford to think in isolation when it comes to social media or mobile or cloud. These are not things that are in their individual silos. These are things that have to be worked together. You have to combine the big three. And the question is, are you ready for that kind of combination? So as we change our thinking to understand what the mobile phone is, what is the mobile phone? To a lot of folks that I know, it's still something you use to make phone calls and browse the web a couple of times. But really, it's a sensor device. It's a tracking device. It's touch sensitive. It has responsive protocol stacks and can capture tremendous amounts of information. And my challenge to you is, ask yourself, how much are you able to capture that data and use it for your company? Volume, velocity, and then adding structure to it. How do we do that? And the question is taking that big data, that social media information, and putting it together so that you can start not just identifying what is what, but now you can say we've identified it, that's being basically analytical, and now can we predict what is not there? And we're not talking about predicting the future when it comes to social media and analytics. We're talking about predicting patterns and identifying patterns that you can't really show through the data that are there, but the data suggests that it's there. So relevance is very important. We can collect an ocean of information, but it's a question of getting a hold of that big fish. It's a question of getting all that information proper. So the traditional effort to capture collective wisdom. There are a lot of good ways to do it. My company uses some reports called the 15-5 reports. And 15-5, it's a company, and they basically will ask you, as employees, to spend about 15 minutes or less filling out an information that a manager can then read. It's very useful, okay? It's a good outreach program. Your supervisors can read what people are up to and what they feel is very important, and they can begin to understand the collective wisdom of a company. But how can we make that automatic? Instead of me having to fill out a report for you to read, how about the idea that you can identify through my activities exactly what I'm doing? Because one of the strengths of this report is it asks me on a weekly basis to give information. One of the weaknesses is it is asking for my opinion about what I'm doing. Imagine if using analytics and social media, you can basically take a look at James Stanger's activities and really judge from an objective perspective what's happening. So following is an example of a traditional report talking about a company performance. And I won't go into tremendous detail right now, but I wanted to show you that basically it's a typical report that goes into what the 2012 result, what the 2013 result is, and basically engagement items here. And then by analyzing people's responses to questions about what they're happy about, what they're unhappy about, this company gives a summary of positive things and things that could be improved, and talking about engagement levels and improvements and all that. So there are findings here that this company was able to discover about what it means for this company to be particularly productive. And they gave some great information. It's a brilliant report. But how much do people, when they self-report, do they really give up? How much do they really say? Imagine if instead of somebody interpreting this data who's a professional at this, imagine if the data is made available in such a way, if the data is collected in such a way that it's kind of indirect, and then you can start to analyze the data and patterns yourself. So here's what you do. You use the wise use of web technologies, HTML5, JavaScript, CS3, and XML. I often call HTML5 JavaScript and CSS3 the HTML trifecta. It's a very important part of it. These are technologies that you will be using to capture data and then to analyze their performance. You'll be using platform as a service and software as a service. You'll also even be using software-defined networking. And of course, tools such as Hadoop. And there are others. Hadoop is an older technology, but there are newer ones that are out there, Qubole and XPlenty, and MapReduce to analyze and truly understand what your company is doing. This way, you can understand when it is necessary to educate users. You can discover when it's necessary to change a management structure. You can understand what it means to invest in a particular technology to make your company even smarter than it already is. Now, I focus today on the idea of creating a smart company, but these kinds of technologies are things that can be used also on a societal level. So thank you very much for your time. I'm James Stanger, and I'm from CompTIA, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at all. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. James. Also with us today, the Research Director of Gartner, Mr. Ed Gabrice. Ed Gabrice is a Research Director in Gartner CIO Research based in Dubai, UAE. His research focuses on IT leadership, IT strategy, and IT organizational design. Specifically, he helps CIOs and their directs to develop business-aligned strategic plans and associated strategic planning processes, as well as organizations that are focused on the businesses they serve. Please welcome Mr. Ed Gabrice, who will deliver his presentation on the future of IT and the Internet of Everything.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Just turn the microphone on. Yeah? Okay. Well, thank you for having me here. It's very exciting to be able to talk to this group, and with some of the other speakers seeing what they're speaking about, I'm sure it's going to be a great couple of days. As was mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about Internet of Things, but when I was asked to speak, I thought, well, what might really help this group? And considering, as you heard from my background, I spent a lot of time talking with CIOs within the region and across EMEA and even in the US and other parts. And one of the things that we find very interesting that people are talking about is not just Internet of Things, nexus of forces, smart technologies. It's how are CIOs and IT leaders responding to this? What can we do in the face of all this? Now, you're going to hear quite a few different solutions. What I'd like to do is set a stage for you to be able to go in and maybe ask even smarter questions during the workshops and during the panels. So this begins with a survey that we conduct every year. This year, it was a little bit different. This is the largest survey of its kind, and longest running. We have talked to over 4,000 CIOs, industry experts, and we asked a very important question. And this is about digital technology. And do they feel overwhelmed? Is it too much to handle? A lot of what you'll be hearing today. And it was a resounding yes. There is a digital tsunami upon us. 51% of the people we surveyed thought so. And then we asked them a follow-up question. Are you prepared? And 42% of the IT organizations say they are not prepared for this. So this next 23 minutes, we're going to talk about how to prepare and what industry experts, IT leaders in the region and across the globe are doing to prepare for this. This is a little bit about the survey, just to give you a sense of the size of it. Over 77 countries, over 3,000 CIOs. This is